President Erdogan has cemented his hold on power in Turkey. Erdogan's party and its alliance partner have won a majority in the presidential and parliamentary elections. The main opposition party has conceded defeat in an election he described as unjust and that warned that the country was entering a dangerous regime of one-man rule.
Buna göre Sayın Erdoğan, lütfen artık bugünden sonra AK Parti Genel Başkanı gibi davranmayınız. 81 milyonun Cumhurbaşkanı oldunuz. Herkesi kucaklayınız. Bugün Türkiye'nin tamamında milletimiz özgür iradesiyle sandığa gitmiş, oyunu kullanmış, kendisi ve ülkesi için tercihini yapmıştır. Seçimlerin rekor bir katılımla sonuçlanmış olmasını milletimizin bize ve tüm dünyaya çok önemli bir mesajı olarak görüyorum. Gayet açıktır. Türkiye %90'lara yaklaşan seçimlere katılım oranıyla tüm dünyaya demokrasi dersi vermiş.
Erdogan supporters took to the streets of Istanbul to celebrate the Week Free celebrations erupted outside Erdogan's residence in city and AKP headquarters in Ankara with crowds of flag-waving supporters thronging the squares. Sunday vote ushering a powerful new executive presidency long sought by Erdogan and backed by a small majority of Turks in 2017 referendum. Critics say that it will further erode democracy in the NATO member state and entrench one-man rule. An unexpectedly strong showing by the AK party's alliance partner, the nationalist MHP party, could translate into a stable parliamentary majority. Erdogan seeks to govern freely. Turkey held Sunday's elections under a state of emergency declared after a failed military coup in July 2016. This limits some freedoms and allowed the government to bypass parliament with decree. Both Erdogan and his rival presidential candidate Muharrem Ince of the Republican People's Party, or CHP as it is known in Turkey. They had promised that they would lift the state of emergency after the election. Thousands of jubilant Kurds flooded the streets, setting firework and waving flags as the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party won enough votes to enter the Turkish legislature, with 95% ballots counted in the parliamentary elections. The pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party had won 10.94% of the votes, exceeding the 10% threshold required to enter the legislature. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party had 42.68% of the votes. Republican People's Party had 22.5% and the National Movement Party had 11.28% of the votes.
Güzel bir duygu. Baskılara rağmen, şiddetlere rağmen, medyalara rağmen bu zaferi kazandık. Ne mutlu halkımıza, onurlu direnişi gösteren bütün halkımıza sonsuz teşekkürlerimizi sunarız.
This election was touted to be the most important one in the country's history, but not just because it makes Erdogan the longest-serving leader, but also because it makes a tectonic change in the political system of Turkey. The country has moved from a parliamentary democracy to a presidential one last year. Turkey passed a constitutional referendum that would give the Turkish president more powers. He is now the head of the executive branch. If you are wondering what the referendum changes for Erdogan, it's this. He has more powers than he did at the presidency in the previous term. Erdogan has the power to appoint the vice president, high-level judges, and even dissolve the parliament. While martial law will no longer exist, the president will be able to declare a similar state of emergency, one that gives authorities power to restrict basic rights. When the Turkish president announced snap polls back in April, he caught many off guard, but now he has cemented his grip on power, and Erdogan has ensured that there was no place for dissent in the run-up to the elections. His critics say that the campaigning took place under deeply unfair conditions, with Erdogan dominating media coverage. Pro-Kurdish party HDP's presidential candidate Selahattin Demirtas campaigned from a prison cell. He was arrested and detained on terrorism charges that he denies. If convicted, he would face 142 years in jail. Since the coup in 2016, the country has witnessed a crackdown of alarming proportion. Over a lakh of people detained. At least 1,34,000 officials, teachers, bureaucrats and academics were sacked, and close to 5,000 judges and prosecutors were dismissed. The 65-year-old leader has divided the Turks, but his popularity cannot be undermined. millions of working class Turks rooted for him for delivering years of stellar economic growth. Turkey's GDP expanded 7.4% in 2017, which was its fastest annual since 2013. Turkey's economy was the fastest growing across the world until now. Under Erdogan, the government also undertook construction of the roads, bridges, airports, hospitals and schools, making him a popular leader. But the road ahead is going to be challenging for the Erdogan. The country faces two big issues at the moment. First, decline of the Turkish lira. It is down 9% since January this year, since Erdogan became the first president in 2003. The lira has lost 65% of its value against the US dollar. Second hurdle is the sky-high inflation rate, which stands at 12% currently. The government target was to limit to 5% but has failed to do so. Erdogan has ruled Turkey with an iron fist after the election win. Turkey enters a phase of one-man rule as changes approved by the last year's controversial referendum take effect. The Turkish president has given an exclusive interview to WION last year. He spoke about the host of issues, including his critics, his crackdown back home, as well as his position on the global and regional matters, including Kashmir. Here is the interview.
Hello and welcome. This is World is One Global Leadership Series on WION, where we bring you iconic voices on global issues that affect us all. We bring you their perspectives on key issues and give you a sense of the past, present and future trajectory of international relations. In this edition, we present to you Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of Turkey, the man who looks set to change Turkey's destiny.
Demokratik mücadelemizi sonuna kadar sürdüreceğiz.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been in public life for more than 2 decades now. He was the mayor of Istanbul in 1994. He founded the Justice and Development Party in 2001 and remained the Prime Minister from 2003 until 2014, when he became the President of Turkey. After the 16 April referendum, many are describing him as the strongest president ever in Turkey's 94-year-old modern history. He seems to be unstoppable and remains a popular but some say polarizing figure at home and abroad. As Turkey's membership of the European Union remains in a limbo, Turkey is looking east to countries such as India. President Erdogan hopes to boost bilateral trade, explore opportunities for joint Turkey-India investments in third countries, and also get India to rein in the activities of his arch-nemesis Fethullah Gulen, the Turkish cleric who remains in exile in the United States and whom Erdogan accuses of plotting the failed coup in July 2016. Mr. President, welcome and thank you for speaking to WION. Now, we are meeting a few days after you won a hard-fought win in the referendum. What is your state of mind? Are you relaxed, relieved, satisfied, or are you anxious?
Ben de özellikle çok teşekkür ediyorum. 16 Nisan seçimlerinden sonra sizlerle
I am happy with the outcome of this referendum. I am also grateful for the opportunity to talk to the people of India. The referendum was a success.
Hint halkına şahsım ve milletim adına kalbi şükranlarımı bildirmek isterim.
It was important that we change a presidential form of government to an executive presidency.
Türkiye'de bir sistem, yönetim sistemi değişikliğinin kabulü.
The changes to the constitution that we sought in the referendum will be implemented from November 2019.
Kasım ayından itibaren yapılacak bir seçimle de artık bu sisteme göre başkanlık ve bu sisteme göre parlamentonun oluşumu
To my mind, the outcome of the 16th April referendum was the most important moment in the 94-year-old history of the Republic of Turkey.
Önemli bir adımı olacaktır.
Now, some would say you are the strongest president ever in modern-day Turkey, whereas some others would say that a strong, all-powerful president is not good for Turkey. Your thoughts?
Şimdi tabii biz herkesin düşüncesine bu
We would
noktada
be
anlayış gösteriyoruz.
understanding towards the opinions of everybody in this regard. But I have been the mayor of the biggest city of the Republic of Turkey and one of the biggest cities around the world for 4.5 years. In terms of local government, I have great experience, and local governments are the foundations of democracy. They are the building blocks for democracy. And then I became the Prime Minister. I had been the Prime Minister of Turkey for 12 years, and for the last 2.5 years I have been the President of the Republic. For the future of Turkey, we've decided to come up with this change in our system just because of our experiences with regards to what we have lived through in Turkey and all around the world. And we are together with G20. We are together with India in G20, and I know the countries which are being run with executive presidency and the ones which are not run by an executive presidency. And this system is going to be quite compliant with our dynamics and with our cultural values. We have been cultivating this constitutional amendment consisting of 18 main articles, and the people of Turkey approved this constitutional amendment, and right now I hope and pray that it will be auspicious for not only my people but also for the entire country.
Ülkemiz, milletimiz için hayırlı olsun.
Some of your critics would say that you are a polarizing figure, but you seem to have maintained your popularity with the people at large. You seem to be very popular with the people in the rural areas, also the young people in cities. Now, what makes you so popular with the people of Turkey today?
Ben şunu söyleyeyim.
Let me say the following.
Tabii
of course,
sadece
with the political party we had established, especially since the year 2001, we have been a strengthening political movement. We've never lagged behind, which is a demonstration of the fact that we are a multifaceted, multidimensional political party that embraces its own people, without any discrimination whatsoever on the basis of religion, on the basis of freedom of expression, on the basis of fundamental rights and liberties. We have an understanding of embracing the public at the largest extent possible, which brought us to garnering 52% of the votes as a result of the presidential elections 2.5 years ago. And as the political party, we have garnered almost 50% of the votes of the entire people in Turkey. And in the parliament, our majority never went down below 60%, which means that we are not a polarizing political party. Instead, we are a political movement that embraces its own people. If we were a polarizing party, the people would not bring us to where we are today within a democratic society. That's why, instead of talking about the polarization or divisiveness, we always look at the ballot boxes, what the ballot boxes would say would matter most. Nowhere around the world would you see a turnout of 85% or 86%.
86'ı aşkın bir şekilde sandığa katılımla seçimin yapıldığı ülkeler yok gibidir.
In Europe, there are such countries where you see a turnout of not more than 35% or 40%, but in Turkey, please consider the significance of this. The last referendum witnessed a turnout of the people of about 86%. This is what Turkey has achieved. And in some places, in theocratic societies, as a result of oppression, turnout may rise significantly, but it's not the case in Turkey. This was a very democratic elections, and the results were welcomed by everybody. The referendum was concluded in full peace, so I'm proud of this and I'm proud of my people. Everybody exercised their democratic rights in the best fashion possible, and I would like to congratulate everyone because I know that tomorrow will be much better for my country than it is today, and people will embrace one another more and more.
Now, where does Turkey or you as a president of Turkey stand on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir?
Şimdi özellikle şu anda
Thank you. The relations between India and Pakistan, if we dig closer, dig deeper, I can confidently say that the relations between the two nations are improving on a daily basis, which makes me very happy. But this Kashmir question, saddens us deeply, because I think this is a question that upsets both of the countries involved, and surmounting the Kashmiri challenge will contribute tremendously to the global peace. For the last 7 decades, this question has not been settled, and I believe doing so will provide a relief for both of the countries. Extending conflicts, extending questions, and carrying these questions to the future will be unfair to the future generations, because they will have to pay the price in the future. And right next to the prosperity of the Kashmiri people, we need security and stability in Southeast Asia more and more. We don't want to see that picture. We want this landscape to be peaceful, we want to win over friends, and we will increase the number of friends wherever we go. India is our friend in the region. Pakistan is our friend in the region. And there are certain aspects which contribute tremendously to our ancient relations. In terms of faith, in India, right next to our friendship, we have the followers of the Muslim faith, and in Pakistan there are Muslims, and this is bringing us even closer to one another in terms of building bridges and strengthening dialogue between different stakeholders. We shouldn't allow more casualties to occur. And by strengthening multilateral dialogues, we can be involved, and through the multilateral dialogues, I think we have to seek out for ways to settle this question once and for all, which will provide great benefits to both of the countries as the parties of this question. My dear friend, Mr. Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, is an individual with whom I've been discussing these issues at every length, and I know that he is a good intended man. I heard him personally speaking about his will to settle this question once and for all. So, if we keep the dialogue channels open, we can settle this question once and for all. And all around the world, there is not a better option than keeping the channels of dialogue open. We have to contribute to global peace. If we can do this, I think we can garner very positive results. And I would like to remind you that security, stability and prosperity of the region is very important to us and for us. And I want this mentality to prevail amongst the leaders.
Now, to that, an Indian national could turn around and say, well, in that case, the demand of the Kurdish people, for instance, for independence could be legitimate. So how would Turkey react to such an assertion if it indeed happens?
Well, if we compare apples to oranges, we will make a big mistake. We have no problems with the Kurdish people, Kurdish citizens in Turkey. We have a problem with the terrorist organization, with a terrorist organization. With regards to the Kashmir question, there is no similarity whatsoever. There, the nature of the dispute is different. There is a territorial dispute. And Pakistan is pursuing, as a state, her own thesis and her own arguments, and they are right. And India, as a state, is pursuing her own agenda and her own arguments, and they are right too. But inside Turkey, we see a separatist terrorist organization called PKK alleging to represent the Kurdish descendants. But in Kashmir, the situation is much more different. So, we do not see a state or a similar question in Turkey, but there is a state of India and there is a state of Pakistan in that part of the world who are in need of settling this dispute once and for all. But in Turkey we have PKK, we have YPG and YPD. These are just terrorist organizations, and let's not make a mistake of comparing these questions, these problems with one another.
Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or the OIC, for instance, routinely makes statements critical of India. Now, this when there are more Muslims in India than many other countries around the world. So why this prejudice against India on this count, especially on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir?
Şimdi bakın İslam İşbirliği Teşkilatı'nın yapmış olduğu
the statements released by the OIC quite naturally have the two-state question at the basis. We are the term presidents of the OIC, and when such disputes arise, if there are certain steps taken forward ending in terrorism, the OIC would criticize those attempts and those intentions and those actions, and statements could condemn terrorist actions, and there is nothing else that the OIC could release a statement on. Pakistan consists of 100% Muslims, and there is a very serious Muslim population inside India. And as the OIC, we would never act against India, we would never release statements against India. This is not what we're running after. All we want to see is to open the channels for dialogue in order to bring India and Pakistan closer to one another, in order to hopefully settle the dispute on Kashmir once and for all. This is what is troubling us. This is what we're working on. So, Indian Prime Minister and the Pakistani Prime Minister are having talks. I hope and pray that as a result of these talks, peace will be established and a problem dating back to 7 decades will be solved.
The OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, now it also always talks about self-determination. Now, can self-determination be a sustainable solution for crises around the world, be it Jammu, Kashmir, or any other crisis around the world? Is it practical, you think? Is self-determination a practical solution? And also, if it indeed so, then shouldn't it be applied universally to other crises around the world, such as Taiwan or Tibet or Balochistan or even Kurdistan? I mean, there's no end to these crises where self-determination can be applied.
First of all, we have to elaborate on this meticulously. The OIC is representing a certain population around the world of about 1.7 billion people. Such a vast population is getting represented by an NGO, by a mechanism, and of course it would be difficult not to think that this mechanism wouldn't have an area of influence. Many countries have their potentially influential areas around the world, and of course OIC member states are demonstrating some financial strength too. Politically, economically, and commercially, these countries have a say in various global matters. And these countries can contribute tremendously to the establishing peace. And this is what is expected out of the OIC. And OIC is assuming this responsibility and shall assume this responsibility in the future too. And while self-determination issues are getting discussed, of course, this is going to be approved by all the member states of the OIC. And when that happens, nobody should criticize OIC. Nobody should question the OIC as to what kind of decisions they make, because these countries making up the OIC are also members of the United Nations. They have a weight in the United Nations. And in the United Nations, they can take necessary steps forward through different cooperations. And they're inside the Security Council within the UN. They are the non-permanent seat holders, but even India is not a non-permanent seat holder right now. India wants to become a permanent seat holder at the United Nations Security Council, and I'm saying the following: the world is greater than 5. This is my argument.
dünyada kabul gördüğü gün
if it gets accepted by the world, India will become one of the permanent seat holders of the Council of Security Council at the UN. In my argument, there will be no permanent or non-permanent seat holding position. There will be 20 members, which will rotate every 2 years.
bu 20 üye 2 yılda bir
So 196 nations around the world will be rightfully represented under the roof of the United Nations, and they will be continuously represented at the Security Council.
Güvenlik Konseyi'nde temsil hakkını kullanmalı.
10 countries may rotate every 2 years, and the rest of the 10 countries may continue their posts. So there will be a continuum.
Dolayısıyla hafıza kaybı olmaz. Bu da devam etmiş olur.
But the world shall get the opportunity to be represented fully at the Security Council, and all the religious groups and religious
imkanını bulur. Dolayısıyla böyle bir
all the religions of the world will have been represented there. India is a very important power in that regard, and India
büyük bir güç.
should be represented at the Security Council.
Bir defa kesinlikle
we're talking about 1.3 billion inhabitants of India, and is it natural for India not to be represented at the Security Council?
Güvenlik Konseyi'nde olmaması düşünülebilir.
And India is home to many religions and many faiths. Why do you think India is missing from the Security Council? We only have the United States, we only have Europe.
Peki kim var? Sadece Amerika var.
This is a problem that needs to be eliminated. In the post-war era, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War, the United Nations Security Council emerged, which has never been reformed. It needs to be updated, and let's update it, is what I say.
Güncellenir. Gelin bunu güncelleyelim diyorum.
But the permanent seat holders of the Security Council don't wish to lose their seats. This is my argument.
Now, why is Turkey reluctant to support India's quest for the membership of the nuclear suppliers group?
You are not knowledgeable in that regard. In terms of nuclear suppliers group, we have been supportive of India, and we have been supportive of Pakistan similarly.
So is that why this equivalence between India's membership and Pakistan's membership? Why can't India's membership be accepted on its own merit?
We're not linking the two. That's why I said this is India's right and Pakistan's right at the same time. They have both nuclear capabilities, and we are trying to act very fairly, and we are supportive of India, and the Prime Minister of India is thanking me for that support. And similarly, we have been supportive of Pakistan. I think India, she was fair enough to support Pakistan. It should be fair enough to support me. This is what the Indians should think, and this is how we approach. We are very objective, and we are very positive towards that process.
Mr. President, the idea of secularism has been revisited or challenged in Turkey and in India too. Now, unlike in France, where secularism means the absence of religion from public places or the ability to practice or profess the religion without discrimination.
I'll make a definition of what secularism means. My definition of secularism can never be observed in Anglo-Saxon countries nor in the continental Europe. They have their own exercises, and I don't think of them as being very correct. There are those who are getting isolated because of their faiths, and I know that things are going on in Europe which are not very honest and sincere. We shouldn't make these mistakes, because when we established our political party for the first time, it was integrated into our program quite meticulously. So what is secularism? Secularism, according to our point of view, means all of the religious groups will have the full liberty to exercise their faiths, and the state will have the same distance vis-a-vis all religious groups and all forms of faith. And the exercising of the religious faiths will be under the guarantee of the state, whether it be a Buddhist, whether it be an atheist, or a Christian, or a Muslim, regardless of their descendants. Everybody should be free to exercise their faiths, and nobody should interfere.
Sure.
This is the political program of the party that I'd established.
Now, there was this controversy over the hijab in France and other European countries. You've taken a contrarian position. Now, in your estimation, for you, was it an issue of choice or freedom, or was it about asserting one's religious identity?
Well, headscarf or hijab is the exercising of a necessity introduced by one's faith, i.e. Islam. Allowing that to happen or not depends on how those regimes define secularism or define their approach towards different religious groups. No religious group in Turkey had been interfered with, but especially in the last periods, West has been quite aggressive towards the Muslims. The mosques are getting burnt down and swastikas are getting engraved on the walls of many mosques, and hijabs are being banned, and people's exercising of their religious faiths are getting interfered with. And before the referendum, unfortunately, the Europeans took it a step even further, and the Muslims all around the European countries got provoked. And in some countries, they have launched campaigns against me. And in Sweden, in Switzerland, for example, a big banner of mine was actually hung up on the wall with a gun pointed at my forehead. The inscriptions read, "Let's kill Erdogan." This is Islamophobia, and this is animosity towards a faith. But we have never been enemies of any faith. We have never been an enemy to Christianity nor Judaism. Whenever there's a prospective terrorist attack in Turkey, we always protect the synagogues and the churches first in order for them not to get harmed. We get them under severe protection on the basis of the intelligence that we get of a prospective attack. We have the duty to secure all religious groups and all followers of different faiths, and we need to be reciprocated by the Western world. They failed to do that until so far, and they have never done it in the past.
Now, 54 years on, are you still interested in the EU membership? Also, do you think the EU is reluctant to admit Turkey into the EU because EU is by large Christian and Turkey is a Muslim majority nation? So is there an element of racism or Islamophobia also on the issue of Turkey's accession into the EU?
Well, right now, as you've stated rightfully, waiting at the threshold of the EU for the last 54 years, and throughout this period, the EU made significant mistakes. The leadership of the EU member states had never been very sincere or very honest. There were those who were very honest and sincere, of course, but some of them failed to act sincerely, failed to keep their promises. Some time ago, the EU had 15 member states. And the number of the chapters for negotiations then used to be only 15. And then the number of these chapters were increased up to 35. And the chapters could be opened and closed. And when they increased the number of the chapters up to 35, you could no longer open and close the chapters. You can open the chapters, but you can't close the chapters immediately without negotiations. We have one chapter had been closed and opened and closed. 13 of them were opened and not closed. This is a demonstration of the fact that Turkey is working in vain in order to become an EU member state, because the EU will not accept or will not admit Turkey to the Union. There was a foreign minister who is not performing his office any longer. He said, "You're working in vain because you're Muslims. You will never be admitted into the EU," was what he said. And he was an influential individual within the EU at the time. And he told me about different aspects of our prospective membership. He is coming from a very important country. He's not coming from any ordinary country. And when you trace back the conducts, you can clearly see this fact, actually. What country was kept lingering on for 54 years prior to becoming a member of the EU. What is the reasoning? There is no reasoning. We have fulfilled the Copenhagen political criteria in Turkey, fully. And economically, we are doing much better than many of the European member states. In terms of the geographical circumstances, strategically, we are doing great. And let alone our other successes, Turkey is a NATO member, exercising a very significant duty under the NATO rules. But experiencing these challenges within the EU makes it difficult for the Turks to digest. We have 3 million refugees on our soils right now, and the EU pledged 3 billion euros by July 2016. We were not going to receive this money directly. This money was going to be given to the Turkish Red Crescent via UNESCO. But time expired and we've never received funds other than $725 million. And then an additional 3 billion euros were pledged, but we've never received anything. We've only received funds from the UNHCR, and we've only received $555 million from the UNHCR. And do you know how much we've spent? Along with the NGOs, we have until so far spent $25 billion on refugees. Is this fair? We are hosting this many people in Turkey. We are taking care of them. And these people can go to the European countries. They are not going to the European countries just because they can stay here in Turkey. This is what we are facing. But the Europeans still not keeping their promises. If they continue not keeping their promises, we are acting patiently, but of course, after a certain while, we will choose the next path to follow. What are we going to do? We are going to do this following. We will launch another referendum, just like the UK, for Brexit. The UK decided for a Brexit, asking people...
Mr. President, do you have a date for this proposed referendum?
Of course, no, not yet. We are on the brink of a new process. When we're going into this new process, we are going to put the rocks in their rightful places, one by one, and then we will have discussions and deliberations at the parliament, and then, if need be, we will decide to turn over to the people of Turkey.
Your critics say there are no media freedoms in Turkey, journalists are being arrested and imprisoned. Turkey stands 155th in the world media freedoms rankings. Dissent is under threat. So your critics would say some of your actions are not defensible.
Well, of course, these claims are all political. Have you ever had the chance to review the media outlets here in Turkey? What TV channel is closed? All TV channels are open. They are broadcasting. Looking at the media outlets in written media, for example, looking at the highest grossing media outlets, there are many columnists writing against us or covering issues against us. There are columnists attacking us, especially all throughout this referendum campaign. We have been heavily insulted. Which one of them got closed? And the Westerners claiming that judiciary is impartial and independent everywhere, when they see these aspects, they don't seem to admit to. They have attacked us from every aspect possible, through social media, through printed media and visual media. But there's a black propaganda, there's a dark propaganda against us, charging us and the Turkish government especially for alleged conducts of such nature. There are those amongst those who have been involved in terrorist actions. Let's say they are journalists, but they are carrying weapons in their cars. A journalist, do you think he can exercise an infinite array of freedom? Do you have infinite freedom in your country? If you make a mistake in your country, don't you have to pay the price?
You've targeted, your government has targeted the FETÖ, the Fethullah Gulen's organization. He was your one-time ally. Now he is your sworn enemy, as it were. What went wrong? I mean, why this animosity towards him and his group? You accused him of having a hand in the coup attempt last year. So why do you have any evidence at all, or are these mere allegations?
Şimdi bakın, biz öyle kuru iddialarla...
We don't just talk without any grounds. I'm the president of the Republic of Turkey, and Turkey has a government in place. And there was a failed coup targeting me. And those involved in the plotting of the coup are answering before the court of law. We have evidences, we have the alibis and the statements of the perpetrators who have already been detained. The generals involved in this failed coup have provided statements pointing out to these facts. And these statements, these alibis were recorded by the judiciary, and we see that the plotters wanted the chief of general staff to talk to the leader of the Fethullahist movement, Fethullah Gulen. They thought they succeeded in the coup, and they forced the chief of staff to talk to Fethullah Gulen. These have all been recorded. These are all reflected at the minutes throughout the hearings. Everything is known, what the chief of general staff was forced to do and how he responded. This person has fled Turkey and he has been living in the United States for 19 years. This traitor called Fethullah Gulen is hiding in the United States, and his obvious involvement in the plotting of this failed coup is obvious, or are very clear. They have infiltrated into the armed forces, into the police, into the national education and judiciary, along with other state institutions. They've all infiltrated there. And many of them are getting eliminated from the state institutions. We are going to cleanse the institutions. Never forget, when East and West Germany met, more than 600,000 civil servants were actually suspended from the institutions when both sides united once again. Of course, as a result of a coup, there are certain measures we need to take. We will finalize our efforts, or else we will experience the same plot again. In India, for example, Fethullahists have a great network, and tomorrow or the next day they might infiltrate into the government. Please don't take them ever so lightly. And the Indian government should take their presence in India very seriously. The plotters against the state should never be taken lightly.
I want to talk to you about Syria. What is the way forward in Syria, for instance?
Of course, here, our deliberations with Russia are continuing, just like the United States. We are talking to them, and we're talking to all of the stakeholders. Saudi Arabia, Qatar are the others. And within the framework of our deliberations and our assessment, we have a question of the regime there. The regime is waging state terrorism, and at the same time there is a terrorist organization called Daesh. PYD, YPG are the other terrorist organizations in the field, and against all of them we are forging a battle. But we are always stating the fact that in order to destroy a terrorist organization, you cannot use another terrorist organization as an instrument. So let's join forces, beginning with the United States, as the members of the coalition forces, and as Turkey, and Russia is in the field, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they're all there in the field, Qatar. Let's get together and let's eradicate Daesh presence once and for all. Let's wipe Daesh out of the locations they are present, not only in Syria but also in Iraq. Once after we achieve our targets, then we should let's plan an administration for Syria, which is going to be determined by the people. So long as we get rid of Assad, the murderous Assad.
But who is Turkey's enemy number one? Is it the Islamic State or the Gulenists?
Right now, their essences are different. Of course, primarily, our enemies are FETÖ. Our primary enemies are FETÖ. That's the arch nemesis because they're infiltrating into the institutions of Turkey. That's our arch nemesis, and FETÖ has to be eliminated and eradicated as soon as possible. Daesh is a remotely located terrorist organization. And we also have PKK in Turkey. And in the northern part of Syria, we have PKK presence in the form of PYD and YPG. Daesh emerged later in time. Of course, we are fighting Daesh quite rigidly, and 3,000 Daesh terrorists were killed in Syria. But the coalition forces are not fighting Daesh as committed as we are.
Very briefly now, NATO appears to have taken a resurgent, a belligerent stand against Russia. Now, Turkey is a member of NATO. At the same time, can it also hope for better ties with Russia being a member of NATO?
Well, those issues need to be discussed in their own place and time. Our location, our position in NATO is different, and our current relations with Russia are different. Russians are our neighbors, and we have a very significant trade volume. And similarly, we have positive relations with all the member states under the NATO roof. Commercially and commercial, military, and socially, we have strong relations with NATO member states. One cannot be favored at the stake of the other. We want the entire world to be in full peace, and we want to establish great relations with all of the countries around the world, protecting our mutual interests based on a win-win scenario.
On that note, Mr. President, may I thank you for your time. Pleasure talking to you.
And I would like to salute the people of India wholeheartedly.